You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
And welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss Nerd podcast. Nerds! And we're already kind of nerding out here as we go to tape. I was going to say tape. We don't tape.
We go to tape.
As we go to whatever.
Yeah.
As we go into the ether.
Yes.
And send our signals out into the universe. Getting cosmic, man. As always, I'm with Cap and Alex from the Something Good Network.
Yo.
What's up, everybody?
And you can check out all the good stuff on the Something Good Network.
That's right.
And I recommend it to everyone listening. And in the meantime, you are, of course, joining us as we get nerdy with our Kiss stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're going to go kind of deep dive nerd.
Yeah, it's kind of like the inception of nerds. The nerds are talking about the nerds that got together to be nerds.
Lots of minutia here.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit. We are going into, I guess this is the year 1994. Mm-hmm. We've come out of the Revenge Tour cycle, which ended at the end of December of 93, with the Live 3 coming out in the following spring. Spring of 90, all right, I've already messed up. December of 92, the Revenge Tour ends. Spring of 93, Alive 3 comes out.
There we go.
We talked about some of the performances they did to promote Alive 3 because they're not touring in this period. In all of 1993, there is actually some touring, I believe.
Yeah, they did a little bit of promo for Alive 3, and that's when they started kind of scaling the stage back a little bit. And not using the full Revenge setup.
When did they do the... you know what? I have this. So it's really not until 94 that they tour again, which we'll talk about on the next episode.
Yes.
But on this episode, we're going to look at the what is now very commonplace, and there's been tons since, but in the early 90s... there was the advent of what are now known as tribute albums.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And way ahead of the curve of this tribute album concept was an album produced by an underground label out of Seattle, Washington called CZ Records. But before we get there, real fast, let's just touch on a couple of things that were going on in 1993, because we're kind of zigzagging through the time here because we wanted to do both tribute albums simultaneously. Yes. 93, they do play on September 11th at the Concrete Foundations Forum, which is a sort of hard rock heavy metal label consortium of some sort for industry folks to mingle and advance their thing.
Right.
Yes. The wheelin' and dealin'.
It's interesting to note the set list isn't entirely comprised of classic makeup era material, including the first ever live performance of Going Blind.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already kind of feeding the nostalgia monster a little bit.
They're starting to really tap into recognizing that there's what we all know that is the band, that is the era.
And Gene has said he told music outlets that the band would be performing songs that they don't usually do in advance of the event. So they were even kind of using that as a
telegraphing. On September 18th, they play at a private engagement for the daughter of the chairman of Coors Brewing, and they play 7 songs for her wedding reception.
And I'm picturing Gene going, "She was a very attractive woman."
Yeah.
I want to know, there's
a million ways you can go with that, and I'm not going there. All of the songs on that set were classic makeup era, with the sole exception is Forever.
Yeah, which I'm sure was the dance.
Yeah.
I would actually love to see video footage of this.
There's, they did a private function some point in the early 2000s. There's video of where they're playing in someone's backyard with no makeup. It's really kind of bizarre. But so even in the cultural shift that seems to be occurring in this time, from the kind of poser hair bands to the rootsier, grunge bands, if you want, and I'm using those terms with finger quotes, poser and rootsier. It's
more grounded.
It's all to your taste, obviously. But Kiss, throughout it all, seems to have surprisingly maintained a sizable credibility. It seems like it is actually elevated, in fact, if anything.
Yeah, I thought about that today, where it's like in a scene where everybody kind of characterizes these quote-unquote grunge bands as anti-rock star. They're celebrating the rock starness of classic Kiss.
Well, I think what it is they're all fans of classic Kiss. Whether that shows how universally their appeal was back in the day. They haven't been the commercial juggernaut of that era, but now as there's this rising tide of new younger bands bringing the new thing, but they still celebrate that same, it shows that shared foundation that, your quote unquote poser hair bands and your quote unquote rootsy or, legitimate whatever grunge bands, but they all share a passion and a love for Kiss. And to that point, that Underground album, this is released in August of 1990. So this is so far ahead of the curve. So A, it was unusual to have a tribute album, and B, it was even more unusual to have a tribute album to Kiss,
right?
And so that in traditional kind of punk rock self-effacing, kind of irony, it's called Hard to Believe, a Kiss covers compilation.
Yep.
And I think this is apparently a joint effort with an Australian label called Waterfront, because there's a sizable number of Australian acts on this. I'm not 100% on that. But CZ Records was a Seattle-based label, and they were committed primarily to recording Seattle-based bands. It was not unusual for these labels to, cultivate their own quote-unquote scene.
Right.
And I think it was owned by the bassist from the band Skinyard, who appears on this record. His name was Daniel House. And I guess CZ kind of was way ahead of everybody, because they released what is universally recognized as probably the first grunge compilation. But back in the day, the term grunge, it's very different than what became the MTV version that we all know. Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, et cetera, et cetera. This was kind of a different thing. It was more of a punk rock thing. Yeah. And it was punk rock bands that kind of more embraced the 70s hard rock style. And
would you say Mudhoney kind of fits in
Mudhoney was, and before Mudhoney there was a band called Green River, who I think were also on this Deep Six comp that CZ had put out. It's just very much a different thing. It was a term that was starting to get lobbied about quite a bit. It was kind of a dirtier, kind of, like I said, more rockin' version of punk rock.
Yeah,
but
more
still,
chops in it.
But still very much a punk rock thing. So
did you hear this record when it first came out, or did you kind of hear it after the fact?
I'd heard of it and I couldn't find it. And you know what? I found it finally, and it was probably in the summer of 91. And I want to say I found it while I was visiting up in Roanoke, Virginia. And I had it, and I don't have it anymore. And I think that I passed it off to your stepfather.
I was going to say, my stepfather, Eric Stiff, he has it.
Okay, then he's got my copy that I bought.
Yeah, I've not heard this until recently, leading up to this episode.
And Eric, if you're listening, I want it back. It's not really a great record by any stretch, but it's very interesting.
That was going to be my question to you, because, spoiler alert, I listened to this all the way through once. I could not get through it. I didn't know maybe if it was a situation of you had to be there to appreciate it kind of thing. If I didn't just understand what they were going for, but it's every song just kind of felt half-assed. Like, it's like even the bands that were doing it, I was like, if you tried it one more time, it probably would have sounded better.
Let's go through it track by track here.
Okay.
And we'll get our impressions. I mean, it starts off with the band Bullet LaVolta doing Detroit Rock City.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this one of the Australian bands? Or
No,
one of the,
Bullet LaVolta were from Boston.
Okay.
Boston.
Boston.
Yeah, there's a lot of bands I'd never heard of until listening to this record.
I had first heard of Bullet LaVolta when they were touring with a equally probably unknown Soundgarden. And I remember them playing locally, but I never went to go see them. And it seemed like they had a little buzz at the same time. There was, Soundgarden had a little buzz, Nirvana had a little. This is all before they got signed to major labels. I can remember this being an underground music fan. And Bullet LaVolta was one of these bands that had that kind of trajectory for half a second.
Got it.
Not all of them were going to make the bullseye, and obviously we know who did.
Yeah.
It could have been just as easily none of them, but several of these bands on this comp were part of that trajectory. There was this rising tide of these bands. Mm-hmm. It was getting very not popular, but it was growing in its popularity. They play this pretty straight. Like you said, it seems a little bit beyond their grasp as musicians, but it's performed with a real clear love and respect. I think this song, as opposed to a deprecating irony, which some of these do, and we'll talk about that.
So I was going to say,
that's something I don't appreciate.
Even some of the songs that aren't trying to hit with the deprecating irony, it feels like even all the vocals are like.
Well, that's because they're punk rock bands.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably a little too punk rock at moments.
There's a point where it's like there's that dividing line. It's like.
Well, I mean, if we're going punk as in Darby Crash maybe, but there's tons of punk bands that the singers can at least hold a key.
Well, there's some of that on here, but there, certainly by the 80s, a lot of this was coming out of post-hardcore and stuff. You really have to do your history. As a sidebar, we'll just say if you're interested in learning more about kind of the history of early grunge, the pre-MTV, the pre-commercialized version. Our friend Malcolm Tent just recently did a little talk where he does a weekly thing. It's posted on YouTube. Look up Malcolm Tent grunge and you'll find that.
Okay. And
you can get a little bit of a back history of what that was all kind of like back then. If grunge had maintained this kind of thing, if it had maintained its roots or whatever, it would never have had any commercial appeal whatsoever.
Do you think you would have appreciated grunge a little bit more if that had been the case?
Me? Oh, sure. I liked it at the time.
Yeah.
I liked some of these bands, but it was hard to find for me because I wasn't really plugged in. I was still, all of this for me kind of was a convergence of events because I was just really starting to get into the punk rock thing. And this spoke to me more being a hard rock fan. Does it make sense?
Right. And probably
than like some of the more thrashier stuff or crossover hardcore was a thing then, the crossover like DRI and stuff like that.
And this kind of thing was more like a breath of fresh air to me compared to say Poison or
when you're getting like force fed Poison and Whitesnake on the daily from
Van
MTV.
Halen.
Yeah, the Van Hagar Van Halen.
I was going to say Van Hagar at the time.
And Bon Jovi and all of that. These dirty little rock and roll bands. Yeah, they couldn't sing that very good. Maybe they couldn't play very good. But these dirty little rock and roll bands, man, they were like, you're like, this is the real shit.
Yeah.
But a lot of these bands, I can remember either their names from like punk rock magazines or seeing their singles maybe somewhere, but I would never have necessarily picked it up. So a lot of this is my first time hearing any of these bands up to and including Nirvana. Next track was Parasite by a band called the Smelly Tongues, which was one of the bands from Australia. And Australia's always been ahead of the world in this regard with this high energy garage kind of punk rock.
Still to this day, too, I think.
They've always had, arguably the better bands.
Rose Tattoo. Outside of AC/DC, obviously.
Going into the underground, those bands like Bored and Cosmic Psychos for sure.
Yeah.
And there was a band that came up later on. Now there was a band called God in the late 80s, and they were just three teenagers. And one of them, I think his name was Tim Hensley, went on to form a band called the Powder Monkeys, which was really great rockin' shit. Those guys they were just balls to the wall rock and roll bands.
Right.
And there's just a shit ton of them. I mean, I can't even, I get overwhelmed trying to think of the names,
We had Love, who did that song. Fuck. But yeah.
Just and this kind of falls in line with that. I don't think the Smelly Tongues were as good as, say, like a band like Bored. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Bored were happening right at this point yet or not. The band God on a sidebar had a song called Rockin' Marky, and at the end of the song, as it goes out, it does this little bounce, and for no reason whatsoever, they start roll calling all the names of the band members in Kiss. Gene Simmons, Ace Frehley, Paul Stanley, Peter Criss, Kiss, and it ends.
Nice.
And these are teenagers in the late 80s.
Yeah.
They had kind of missed that, but that shows that Kiss's thing we talked about how big they were in 1980 over there. Still holds it's still casting a long shadow.
Just naming them like John, Paul, George, and Ringo almost.
Yep.
How many bands can you do that with? And that's kind of my point about the classic Kiss versus
and
all
that was
other
even
incarnations.
With Carr.
Yeah. Which they don't name check him in that. So.
No.
Snowblind by Skinyard. And like I said, I think Skinyard might have been the guys behind getting this thing rolling.
And that's unfortunate because the first two were kind of just like sloppy, grungy punk rock versions of Kiss songs. This is the first one I remember just going, come on.
Yeah, kind of did like the punk rock kind of like.
This is it. This to me is quintessential grunge punk to me.
Yeah.
This is Jack Endino's band. I think he was. Oh God, you know what? I should have had that written down. I don't. But he ended up going on to produce many of the Sub Pop records, and that was which really spearheaded the whole grunge thing. Sub Pop had a record singles club, they called it, and they were issuing multiple singles a month, or at least one single a month.
Yeah.
He produced Mudhoney. He produced the Dwarves. He produced Nirvana's first album, the Bleach album. And Bleach.
Yeah.
He produced Zeke, who are a cool band out of Seattle, and
I like Zeke a lot too.
we hope to hear something more from them here soon.
Yes. Nice.
Lead singer Ben McMillian would go on to front Grunt Truck before he finally succumbed to diabetes in 2008. And I only mention that because I believe Grunt Truck opened for Anti-Scene, the band that I was in before I was in the band,
Right.
over in England at one time.
Oh shoot!
This is where that kind of merges with people that we
right.
actually know,
Yeah.
that were actually part of that when it was happening.
It's always good to make the connections.
The drummer is Barrett Martin, who would later play in the Screaming Trees, who would go on to be
Okay.
quite successful, and was also the drummer on the one-off Mad Season album, which was a massively successful album when it came out.
That also had Mark Lanigan, right?
It had the guy from Alice in Chains,
Oh, that's right. It was Lane Staley.
Lane Staley. So, this just kind of shows how this feeds into a mainstream way in a very indirect way.
Yeah.
But you didn't like the version of it.
Did not like this one. This was the first one I vividly remember just kind of going,
Was it just because of the vocal?
the vocal and I don't know, Snowblind is already kind of okay, we in separate conversations we've kind of discussed how hard / you just don't touch Iggy Pop and New York Dolls covers like that. There, it just has such a vibe to it. This song to me almost kind of crosses that line where it's like really the only person that can really properly play this is Ace in the 70s.
Yeah.
So to me, it just kind of felt like it was a setup to fail, and they even whiffed the fail.
Yeah, I wasn't crazy about it either for the vocals, and I'm not familiar with this band at all, so I was just kind of looked at it as just a lesser cover of an Ace song that I like,
Right. Yeah, I don't feel much different on this one.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, I'm just like, give us something here, Russ.
I wanted to see where y'all go. I didn't care for the vocal. I think the music part was okay. I don't think It's pretty raw, but I think it's faithfully executed. I'm okay with the rawness of the music of it, but the vocal thing is kind of hard for me a little bit sometimes.
I feel like you could make that argument with quite a few of these songs.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, that's where all these bands are coming from,
right?
And I think my other problem with it too is if they're going. I mean, I understand the concept of like if you're doing a cover or a tribute, you kind of want to make it your own. You want to change it some. But even just little things, like we'll get to it later on, but with like Dr. Love, they don't come in at the right time with the vocal. Or like sometimes they'll shorten a break or extend a break between verses and stuff like that. And it's like, those are the little things that I honestly just, it throws me off when I'm listening to it. It's just like, that's not really making it your own. That's just changing a time signature. That's changing a break.
Well, yeah, I understand that. The next track is Deuce by Tree People. Tree People were from Idaho and features...
Did you call me?
No, Idaho.
Oh, not you.
Not
don't be so mean.
Idaho. Anyway... it features a guy named Doug March who would go on to found the popular indie rock band Built to Spill.
Okay, interesting. All right.
I didn't care for this track so much. I think it has a kind of a cool manic energy. I really like the solo on it because it's real dissonant and it sounds really good. Mm-hmm. It's not the same as but. That was to me the standout part of that whole song. I was like, man, this would be really killer if the whole song reached that level.
Yeah.
The one thing I can give this one is I like how during the verses there's a little bit like that straighty guitar kind of laying in between the verses. Mm-hmm. That was kind of cool. And honestly, I would have liked this one better if the drummer did the breaks. It's like he just plays steady the whole time.
That happens a lot too on this record. Everybody just plays it straight.
And that's kind of maybe... I think that might be a better way of formulate my problems with it, where I'm just like, just those little things of like, hey, tell the drummer just to stop for that half a bar here, just to kind of give it that feel.
They may not have been able to, a lot of these guys are flying by the seat of their pants. They're not particularly skilled or trained or whatever, but to me, that's part of what gives it some of its charm, that kind of garage rock thing. And, now that you're saying that, and really, I guess you could tie this into the next track. I wonder what the collective age is of every member on this record. If you were to do across the board average, I doubt anyone's older than 25.
That's what I was going to say.
These are pretty young bands.
Yeah.
Christine 16 by the band All.
Which is weird because it's the Descendants with a different singer.
It's
right?
the Descendants with a different singer. And it features the former Black Flag drummer Bill Stevenson, who played on like the My War album. Mm-hmm. And this song already fits well into their wheelhouse. What All and Descendants do, which is that pop punk kind of thing. And so they play it pretty well, pretty straight. And it works for me. I mean, because they haven't done anything radical with it. Might have put a little bit of spin on the ball, but
they're still pretty faithful to it.
Yeah, they're pretty faithful to it.
Yeah, I remember this one being one of them that I was like, okay, yeah, this one isn't as bad. Like, this one roped me back in after like a good handful where I was just like, oh no, what have I gotten myself into? I still wasn't impressed, but I was like, okay, I can actually bob along and follow this one and enjoy it.
The guitar player in this band's Stephen Egerton, who plays in the touring the band Flag, which is former members of Black Flag. He's the only non-member of Black Flag filling in for the rogue member of Black Flag that they're feuding with. So,
he's a great player too.
He is a great player. He plays that stuff really, really well and with a really solid intensity, more intensity than what is demonstrated with All. And I've always said that I don't understand how those guys can play that stuff with such intensity and then they turn around and do something like the Descendants, which to me doesn't have that intensity, and kind of find them kind of lacking personally. But we're going to keep moving here. Let's see. Calling Dr. Love
becomes a whole other podcast.
by the band Hullabaloo. I didn't really find any information on this band. I just didn't like this. I thought it was disposable. I thought it was too dry and too ironic.
Mm-hmm. This one did feel like a little bit of a joke.
It was a joke to them. And, to me, it's like if you're going to be on a tribute album, if you don't like the band, don't do it.
Yeah, and the kind of call out is like there's like a Paul parody at the very beginning. We gotta call out,
Yeah.
Dr. Love,
I get making fun of that a little bit, but I don't know. But then again, maybe we're wrong. Maybe they do love the band, and maybe they are just calling out the cheesiness, and in that sort of fashion. Either which way, it still doesn't work for me. I didn't care for the track.
Yeah, one thing if the track was solid too,
Yeah. And conversely, to prove to the other end of the spectrum, on the vinyl, you would flip the record over at this point. The first track on side 2 is "God of Thunder" by the Melvins, which is clearly done with a lot of love, reverence, and respect,
but still in their own kind of Melvins-y
and done in their
too.
own Melvins-y way. Even has the drum solo. From Kiss Alive, neatly tucked in at the end of it.
Was this before or after they did their Going Blind cover?
I think this is before.
Okay.
But to that end, and as much as I'm pleased with what they were trying to do, this doesn't really ever do much. I've never been a Melvins fan.
I haven't either.
I've never thought they were.
You notice how quiet I was being. I'm sitting here going, I'm going to let them go because clearly they're going to give it some love because this is one of my least favorites on the record.
But I get it with the Melvins though. They're plotting, but it's on purpose.
But it's on purpose, and it's still very Melvin. But I never found the Melvins. People talk about them like their Godhead heaviness and all this.
There's a Grateful Dead kind of following with the Melvins.
Man, they really aren't that heavy, and they're really not that. They don't really write good songs.
They don't do it.
They just never did it for me, which I feel bad saying because they seem like everything I've seen them in interviews and stuff. It's always like, man, I want to like these guys because they seem like really fucking cool people, and they draw from the wellspring of Inspirato that I do, and it's like you would think that they would be.
There's a lot of
right up my alley. Everything I've ever heard by this band has never been.
Well, to me, there's a difference between a band you'd want to have a beer with versus a band you want to see live.
Yeah.
So these would just be it'd actually be a fun band to maybe have on the show at some point. Talk to some guys like that.
I feel bad because I call them the Melvins.
No, but there's a couple of interviews.
Please, we're
with
trying to
Buzz.
still get Bruce Kulick on this show, and you've shat all over him countless times. So
Bruce,
there's a couple.
Why do you suck?
Digging yourself in a deeper hole.
I'm kidding. I don't think he sucks. It's just not my style.
There's a couple of funny interviews with Buzz where he talks about hanging out with Gene too that are fun to watch.
And those would be some cool stories.
Yeah. And honestly, like I said, to me, the saving grace of it is just how much reverence and respect they give the song.
That I can't give it, because when they broke into the Alive drum break at the very end with the flange on it, I was sitting here, I was like, okay, yeah, I totally get where they're coming from. They understand it.
They know, right? But it doesn't do anything for you.
For me personally,
yeah.
But honestly, the next song is kind of what I was expecting out of the whole record. This was such a surprise to me.
Okay, yeah. This is the band Coffin Break from Seattle doing Beth.
In like a very pop punk way.
I thought that was cool as hell.
I did too. I agree. I think this is the best track on the album.
It's just over real quick too.
It's short, fast. It turns that song on. It subverts it in a way, but without doing it disrespectfully. Or seemingly disrespectfully. It didn't sound ironic. It didn't sound like they were doing a send-up parody.
No.
They just did it. They just turned it around and did it their way. This group seemed to be poised to follow in Nirvana's footsteps at one point. I know Kurt Cobain was a big fan of them. But they disbanded in 1993. They were briefly signed to Epitaph Records.
That's nothing to sneeze at.
And this was before. They broke up a year before Epitaph. All these bands that they had, like Offspring and Rancid and all that, started.
It was right before
that.
And they would have
had
fit
they been
right
there.
there.
They would have been right there. I think Coffin Break would have been a huge band had they not broke up.
Oh, that's so sad.
And it's interesting that Gene even noted that this was his favorite track from this album. This was the first. I think this was one of the first things that jumped off the.
I was going to say, I kind of finding information on this record was actually kind of hard. I was trying to figure out if anyone, like specifically Gene or Paul, had heard it and what their thoughts were. So yeah,
this is the only track that I've ever heard any of them reference. Although I know that Gene obviously he was very familiar with the Melvins. And Melvins ended up opening some shows for Kiss at one point.
Right. Yeah.
But this, I remember him saying it was angry sounding and what have you. And I agree, it's pretty snotty for a pop punk song, which to me, that's a key fulcrum point from shitty pop punk to good pop punk.
Yeah.
There is and most pop punk to me is pretty shitty. It sounds like Sesame Street music on 45
And the thing
speed.
is like, I totally
but good
agree.
pop punk has pop hooks and has a snarl and a ferocity to it.
Well, I mean, to a point, Ramones are even pop.
No, that's what I'm
punk, so
saying. Yeah, but the Ramones have that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They have that pop hook. They
They're
have that
still
sensibility,
singing
and they
about
have.
Nazis and shit.
But I also can play with an energy and an anger and a ferocity.
Right.
We're not going to go into
But yeah,
that.
I just wish the whole record had been stuff like that. That was when you take something and do a new interpretation of it, that's what I expected, and I really dug it. Same with the next one.
Chemical People.
Yeah, these were two. I think these are my two favorites. Like, these are two back-to-back solid covers.
I am not 100% here, but I think I once had I'm pretty sure it was the Chemical People doing a cover of Surrender by Cheap Trick. I should have looked that up. I meant to, and I forgot.
I'd be actually now knowing their version of Rip It Out, I'd be kind of curious to hear their Surrender.
Pretty sure it was Surrender. It might have been something else, but I'm pretty sure it was Surrender.
But yeah, this one kind of surprised me. They bumped up the tempo some, but they kept the vibe, if that makes sense. And the bass picked up to fill in a groove.
I wrote that down on my notes. I said, cool bass work. That kind of picks up and covers where the drums fail on it. And it's not that the drums are bad.
They're just steady.
But it's, he wasn't going to try to do Anton Fig. And
Plus at that speed, you really can't.
You really can't.
They 33 to 45'd that. So it's like they were playing it at a 45 speed. So it's like having a good basis to be able to add a little bit of that bounce and groove definitely kind of helped keep it on track.
Pretty rocking little track. I think they did a good job with it.
Compared to the next one, though, which I really feel like...
Yeah, I kind of zoned out halfway through this one.
Okay, this is a band called King Snake Roost, and they're doing I Want You. They're an Australian group that kind of received some, I don't know, I wouldn't say popularity, but they were kind of, I can remember them being a marginal presence in this time when I was getting into this stuff. Never my thing. They're more of an avant art punk kind of a thing.
Oh, okay.
And
sure, why
I
not?
think they probably did more noise stuff, but I'm not super familiar with them. This is very sludgy, very different from the original, and very much not my thing.
Yeah.
I didn't think they did a very good job with this, and I didn't know. That leads me to go to ask the question. I wonder if they got to choose the songs, or if the songs were chosen for them. Because it doesn't seem like this would have been the type of song that this band would have probably done well. Because I wonder if there was something else that this band could have done that would have played to their own. Some of these songs would have to play to the strength of the band. Like we said, Coffin Break did a really that played to their strength because they were able to took it to their strength.
And the weird thing is, like, the lyrics to Beth are kind of a pop punk song when you just read the lyrics to pop punk songs.
But the same with All. It worked. It was already right there for them. And same kind of with Rip It Out. And even to the degree God of Thunder works for the Melvins and to play to their strength.
Yeah.
For
that style.
For that style. But this doesn't seem to work for this band on any level. And I can't, it seems like I've listened to some King Snake Roost, and it's been years.
This is
so
the first I've ever heard of them.
I can't remember.
But the next one, what you would think would be kind of an interesting thing.
I thought it was.
Okay, there's a lot to pick apart here because this is the most
talked about song,
most widely recognized band on the record. This is Nirvana.
Never heard of them.
Yeah. And this is when I first finally heard Nirvana.
Right.
And they're doing a very
Nirvana E.
They're doing a very they're doing Do You Love Me?
Yeah.
And they're doing a send up of it. Mm-hmm. And this is funny yet almost insulting at the same time. I'm not sure 100%, but I'm pretty certain Kurt Cobain doesn't sing on this.
You don't think that's his voice?
No, I don't know for certain. This is one of the only tracks that they had Jason Everman playing guitar on.
Yeah.
Who was only in the band for a nanosecond. He's on the cover of the Bleach album, but he doesn't play on it. He left Nirvana, right? And joined Soundgarden.
Right.
He joined Soundgarden and toured behind the album Louder Than Love, but he doesn't play on that. And then he left Soundgarden. They threw him out, and he sort of disappeared into the ether until he kind of popped up in a New York Times story about his work with the Army Rangers.
Just
Interesting.
the Forrest Gump of grunge.
Yeah, I saw him play with Soundgarden in 1990 something, when around that time, 92 maybe, 91. But I have heard somewhere that he's actually doing the vocal on this as well.
He was like the one guy in the group that was the Kiss fan.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's true. I don't know that's true. Dave Grohl wasn't in the band at this point.
Oh, he wasn't.
This is with Chad Channing on drums.
I was going to say, I don't know my Nirvana history, so.
But the lead vocals might be Chris Novoselic. And
We'll see, because, now knowing
and I'm
that
pretty
Grohl
sure
wasn't
he's
in
the
band,
one doing the, at the end, I don't know what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say because I just can't say what I don't, which was funny.
Well, so.
But unnecessary.
This actually repaints it for me. Okay, so. Again, not knowing my Nirvana history, I kind of just mentally assumed that Grohl had kind of been there from day one. Why not? That's the only drummer you ever hear about associated with Nirvana, really. So, knowing that he was a Kiss fan, I was kind of looking at this through the lens of, we're fans, but we're going to do just a snotty little impression of it because, especially as the black sunglasses and backstage pass makes you look just like a queen. That part, he's being super, super eccentric with the vocal. So I was kind of sitting here going, and even the guitar is messed up, like they're playing wrong notes on purpose. So it's like, okay, maybe just some fans are having a goof. But like now knowing that not even necessarily a fan was in the band, it kind of does paint it in a little bit of a different light for me.
Well, I thought it fits their vibe just fine. Because I know Kurt Cobain would always had that inkling in the back of his head that he wanted to be like a Cheap Trick kind of band when it came to writing songs, and I thought it was a pretty solid choice for him. Yeah, but he's also been
vehemently like anti-Kiss though.
Has he?
I didn't know that.
Not maybe vehemently, but like
he just
not
did like corporate rock.
Yeah, and he's always kind of lumped Kiss into that.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know where he fit into that.
Yeah. I don't fully either, but I just never caught the vibe that he appreciated it.
There's a story that is told about what we're getting ready to talk about, the official Kiss tribute.
Yes.
Where Gene got a hold of Kurt Cobain in the studio and had a long conversation with him, not realizing the whole time it wasn't Kurt Cobain. I forget who it was. But Kurt was like, take this call and pretend like you're me.
That's funny.
Oh, that's great. That's really good.
That's the kind of shit these guys would do back then. They weren't afraid to subvert everything, but again, this is a pre-Nirvana.
Right.
Pre-Nirvana.
Right. Capital
N. But still, this kind of dry, ironic take on it is not something I appreciate. It's something that exists a lot in rock and roll, even to this day, that I really don't like. It carried over to bands that we won't get into it, but I just
that's
don't
a whole
like
other
this.
show.
I don't like that whole "we rock" nudge. We get it. Like they're making fun of it, and I'm like, man, bring it like you mean it. Bring it like you mean it, or don't do it at all.
Yeah.
Next track is the only non-makeup era song on the album. And this is the Hard-Ons from Australia.
See, this sounds like, Terry down the road made this song in his garage.
This really does sound like open mic night. And Terry grabbed the fucking guitar, Bruce decided to jump on the drums, and they decided to try to do a version of Lick It Up.
My wife's singing the harmonies on the chorus.
Yes. This sounds like some bar and grill karaoke open mic night.
The Hard-Ons are a pretty popular band in Australia. They've been around forever.
Sorry, Australian fans.
They did a cover of AC/DC's was it Let There Be Rock or A Whole Lot of Rosie, I think. I don't remember. And Henry Rollins sang lead vocal on it.
No shit.
Cool for
which
him.
is kind of But I mean, I think it just goes to show their stature down there was a little different.
And I understand that. Nothing to take away from their stature, but
there's this is equally as boring as the original, in my opinion.
I actually didn't give it a full listen. I was just like, no, you're not doing anything extra with this. Skip. I didn't even try.
He just made me laugh. It's just like, lick it up.
Yeah, I got through a verse, and I'm like, nope, I get it.
The next two groups I can't find any information on. The next track was War Machine by a group called the Instigators. I found an Instigators that I don't think is the same band, so I didn't want to comment as to who they were or where they were from.
Musically on point, vocally all over the place.
Yeah,
that's the vocals is weak, but I like the dirty rock guitar over the original. I think this sounds what I could almost hear. This would be the way it would have turned out had it been, Ace and Peter maybe doing this song.
Because I always thought this was a pretty cool song anyway, but with that kind of vibe, it adds to it.
I
I'd agree with that.
It's superior. If the vocal was as equally as strong as the music, I'd say it was superior to the original. Which is a rare thing to say about a cover.
Yeah,
but it just has that rock vibe as opposed to that lumbering metal vibe that Kiss were trying to do.
It's a lot more straightforward.
And I don't, and we've talked about this, I don't think Kiss made for a good metal band.
No. Not at all.
The next band is called Thrust. Another band I can't find anything about.
Making
Coincidentally,
love.
and prior to us recording this just yesterday, I actually came across an album by this band for sale at a record store. After I'd already done the homework on this, and I was just like, well, son of a bitch, look at that. I should have picked it up, but I didn't. They do Making Love, and I think they play this pretty well, but to me, I got kind of a snotty old school punk rock energy vis-a-vis the Dead Boys.
Yeah. I think this is one of the few where Speed didn't give it its due. Maybe if they had done it slightly slower.
Maybe a little slower, but it still has its own energy.
And they kind of give it an ending, sort of.
Yeah.
The track at the original, it fades out.
But when I say punk rock, I mean like an American, American division punk rock, which was very much, sneakers and blue jeans and fast food and comic books.
Yeah, no, to me, this is probably the most punk song on the record.
Not the British spiky hair and all that stuff. This is
like
very
this wouldn't have been
Americanized.
this wouldn't have been too separated for something like the Ramones to pull off during like Pleasant Dreams, Too Tough to Die era.
I think they do this with a decent respect.
Yeah.
The album ends with Love Gun by the Surfin' Caesars, which is another Aussie outfit. Aussie. I always say Aussie instead of Aussie. I don't understand where that comes from, but whatever. I think this has got some killer guitar work on this, but I don't like the vocal at all
Again, that seems to just be the overarching thing is some of the music and orchestration is pretty cool on here, but most, if not maybe like 3 songs, the vocals ruin it.
Yeah. Hearing all this now, this whole album, it all sounds kind of dated in its way because it comes from a very particular point in time. But at the time, that was all still very much cutting edge.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was informing what was going to become commercially successful in the next year and a half.
And see, and that was going to be kind of my conversation point to have with you, which is why I was asking if you kind of caught this during its wave. If maybe if it hit you on the first listen a little different than it had me, because my history with this record is since Eric had a vinyl copy, of course, I was like, oh yeah, I've never listened to this before.
My vinyl copy.
Yes, your vinyl copy. and Paul wrote God of Thunder. That's Paul's new little throwout. Like if Gene takes credit for something, he always leans in, and I wrote God of Thunder.
What's interesting again is that this is largely what you...
What I was just going to say is because for me, I kind of felt lost listening to it.
Right.
So it felt like, even though I knew there were quote unquote noteworthy bands on there, because I did do a little bit of back reading because I didn't recognize any of the names. So seeing the few connections of like Black Flag members, XYZ, it kind of grounded it a little bit more. But if I had not done that, it really just felt like a bunch of unknown garage band guys locally all got together and just decided to record a bunch of Kiss covers and release it.
I think that was a big part of the appeal of that whole movement in its time was that it was the antithesis of that high gloss, hair metal, MTV stylized hard rock,
Okay.
whatever.
Now something like this
was
is just
bringing it
regular.
back to that. That was very important that it brought it back to that. The irony of this, you know, and I guess you could call it, for lack of a better term, true grunge rock or whatever. But the irony of this is that, you know, that said, the MTV division, they would come up a year and a half later to become massively successful commercially with, again, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, that sort of thing. And that would be what Kiss would have later attempt to mimic, which we will get to on another episode. But it's the idea and the sentiment driving it, you know, not those bands, but the fact that those bands are all doing Kiss covers.
Yeah, this is like the cool kids club now, putting Kiss over, like that era of Kiss over.
It kind of, and that was what kind of made it neat at the time.
Got it.
You know, again, it's new generation of bands that had cut their teeth on classic Kiss, and it's creating a groundswell of reconsideration and reappreciation, or a new appreciation.
And even the cover itself is a abstract version of the Four Faces from the Love Gun album.
Yeah, and I think if I remember right, it was a gatefold sleeve, and I think you open it up and it was just like a collage of all the merchandise.
Oh wow!
It looked like it was from somebody's personal collection. I remember just like drooling over it. But you know, this is very organic and unplanned. It's the whole phenomenon is organic and unplanned. You know, and you know, it just seems too good to be true in a way. And there's, you know, you could only fuck it up if you put it in the hands of Gene Simmons.
Yeah. Not in his world, though.
So that album came out in 1990, and then of course, you know, all of this is happening over a course of several years, I guess. But at some point in 91, 92, 93, the band's finally made aware of it. Apparently, it was their manager, Larry Mazer, who finds a copy of it and brings it to the band to show them, look. Because his whole operative word, he has said in interviews, was cool. Everything had to be cool.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And he said, look, this is fucking cool. You know?
Okay, interesting.
And so Gene kind of studies it according to Larry Mazer, and says, okay, I want you to go to Mercury and tell them we're going to do our own tribute album. Let's get some money going here. And at which point, Larry Mazer goes, you don't do that. That's not
you
cool.
Don't do that.
That is not cool. At which point he's told, shut up and do your job. According to Mazer, you know, they're instructed to get the money and start putting together a list of acts.
Yeah.
And according to him, there was an A list, a B list, and a C list.
Wow. Who's on the C
I don't
list?
think they went
Basically, this album is the C list.
I thought they had to go with the list after. I don't want to call it the D list, because there's some not D list performers on here, but it was still the...
Yes, there are.
You know what I mean.
At the end of the day, this ultimately leads to Larry Mazer leaving his position as manager.
Yeah.
He quits over this.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Smart.
But
is
I
it
will
smart
say,
because he, you know...
I will say it's interesting because Kiss plays it to where they just want a new manager for the reunion tour.
Well, this is before that. This is 1994. So this is 2 years before the reunion. And we'll get to that because Mazer does come up briefly in the picture in that.
Yep.
So they are, according to Mazer, you can, you know, this could be an apocryphal story, but apparently it would be Gene would call somebody.
Yeah.
And like Madonna and say, I want you to be on our, this is Gene Simmons.
Yes.
Of Kiss. I want you to be on our tribute album. And she'd go, oh, sure, that would be wonderful. That would be great. What a great idea. And then, you know, 2 hours later, Mazer would get a call from Madonna's manager going, what the fuck is this shit?
Yeah.
Why in the hell are you calling, you know?
Yeah, Gene will say that he's reached out to everybody from like Neil Young to fucking Baby Got Back.
And
So it makes a lot.
I think that Nirvana story that I told, where he said we thought he was talking to Kurt Cobain, was part of this process.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And I think generally that was the people would politely say, "Oh, that would be nice. That'd be cool." Yeah. And
So it's like
as
the
soon as
artist
they
would be fine.
And then they'd hang up and call their manager, going, "What the fuck?"
That guy from Kiss with the tongue called me.
Yeah. Apparently, that's what was happening. I don't know for sure, but at any rate,
I remember
eventually-
hearing that too.
They eventually do get to put together this. What is
This?
this? Is entitled "Kiss My Ass." Which,
Now,
why?
before we fully get into the record, I do want to go over one point of minutia that I find very interesting.
Ace's makeup.
Yes. Now, if you look at the album cover, you see a guy in Paul, Gene, and Peter's makeup, but then there's a kid at the table that's kind of wearing like a redone version of kind of like Paul's bandit makeup, but with like a gold outline.
Right.
It's kind of like a newish design. Now, the reason they couldn't do that was because they couldn't clear the rights of Ace's makeup. But that conflates with stories that Ace had already sold the rights by now.
Here's what I think was happening. I think had they all gone to court, Paul and Gene would have walked away with it. They owned it. I think, and I don't know. I've given this some thought because it's very cloudy.
Because again, from what I've heard in the mid '80s or something, because Peter was the first to sell, and then Ace held out a little longer, but by the late '80s, he sold.
I don't know to what end that works. It could have been there could be an agreement where basically Ace is allowed to use that makeup design with impunity, and they would have rights to use it too, but maybe at that point they didn't really want to poke the bear. It would have been easier and cheaper just to have altered it, rather than, even if they knew they could win a lawsuit, it's not something they would financially want to.
Did they think Peter just might not care, or they didn't mind poking at Peter?
I think they own Peter outright.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm just this is
It's
speculation. So I don't know, but it makes sense to
interesting.
me that even now, I bet Ace has rights to use that makeup.
Oh yeah, because I see that design
he
like
does
on
it
his
anyway,
website and like places. So no,
I don't think I think it's probably legally it's probably owned by Gene and Paul, but he has a legal right to use it because that's trademarked.
Yeah.
We've talked about that in previous episodes. That was a big deal for them to get those designs trademarked, and then of course what do?
A year later, take it off. But yeah, so for a Kiss Nerd podcast, I did want to kind of bring up that little bit because everyone just kind of writes it off as, oh, they just didn't have the rights. Well, technically, I think they did by now.
I think they just thought it would be cheaper and easier just not to go there.
Yeah. But either way.
Yeah.
The album is called Kiss My Ass, which I think is a horrible title.
Aw.
I just started leaning into the edginess a little bit more in the
Yeah.
late 90s.
But they, in deference to most retailers, they changed the word ass to a asterisk. And so asterisk, I can't even say asterisk.
Asterisk is a hard one.
And so it's been kind of colloquially nicknamed Kiss My Asterisk.
Now, I will say, there is a bunch of bands that try to find punny words for like their cover albums. Like probably one of the better ones I've seen is like Under the Covers, and it was like covers of like love songs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've got a great one that I've personally never seen anyone use. Now that I say it, I'm going to get flooded with a bunch of people going, oh, someone called it this. Take Cover.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen anyone call an album or covers album Take Cover.
That would be good for a Kiss cover album.
That's what I'm saying. So especially like if they did like the War Machine kind of visual, Take Cover. Come on.
And in the photo, the
Hire
art
me.
itself looks awful too. It's just the family with Kiss makeup around with
and it has the
Thanksgiving
flag as
dinner.
the backdrop, and depending on the country you're in, they would change the flag. I think they did that in 3 or 4 different countries.
Oh, okay.
So let's what?
I was going to say, to add to like more minutia, it's like they wanted to recreate the Presence album cover from Led Zeppelin, which why?
Yeah, and I you know what? I never thought of that, but I can see it now that you're saying it.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Everything about this is really kind of
it's odd. It's just weird.
It's so tacky.
I will say I've had a little bit more time with this one over the years than I have the other. hard to believe. I've kind of listened to maybe once or twice. This one I remember kind of popping my head in and out of at different times throughout the years. So I actually have a couple different interesting takes on this record.
Okay.
This was my first time ever really listening to it all the way through.
Really?
I had no interest in any of this because I don't like any of these bands.
That's what kept me from it over the years.
Same.
I wouldn't say I don't like any of these bands.
I mean,
don't like most of this.
It's like Lenny Kravitz is fine, and Stevie Wonder's there because okay.
Well, yeah, let's get into that.
Okay.
That was something I thought was interesting.
Start off right. That's the first track right out of the chute is Lenny Kravitz doing Deuce, and with Stevie Wonder on board.
Yeah, playing harmonica. Like that was the one
I
one
bet you
A
didn't
list.
see that coming.
The one A-list phone call that went through.
It's different than the original because it's a little more subdued and a little more funkified.
Yeah, definitely funkier.
But allegedly Stevie Wonder had no clue what the hell this was or what it was even for, and that was actually recorded over a telephone.
Interesting.
I think, or it was early digital technology to be able to do that from the way they did it. It was kind of a thing, but I don't think Stevie Wonder knew that this was going to be part of a Kiss tribute album.
It's like Kiss? What? Who?
Yeah.
What do you mean face makeup? I can't see.
You mean you've never seen Kiss? I've never seen anyone.
But I don't know.
Have you ever seen Stevie Wonder's tour bus?
No.
Neither is he. And he rode that thing for years.
I think I'm not a big Lenny Kravitz fan. I couldn't sing you a whole song off the top of my head, and he did a horrible cover of another song. And this one kind of follows in line.
It's fine.
But at the same time, if he's going to do a song, it felt like this was going to be the one. Mm-hmm. And of all the songs, it lends to a groove because of the riff already, if that makes sense.
Right. I guess
so it's kind of like a da 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 da.
And I think he's a professed Kiss fan.
Yes.
He definitely loves the band, and I think he has put a lot of love and heart into this, and he has tried to make it more his own. So that I have a lot of appreciation and respect for. I think it works for him and his style.
I'd agree with that.
It's not something I personally care for, but I think it's easily one of the better tracks on this album.
By far. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat. It's fine for him, but I can take it or leave it at the same time.
Yeah, I think what really drove it would have been, and this is no, Stevie Wonder's a musical genius, right? Yeah. I don't disagree with that statement. I think the harmonica could have been replaced with a fat Les Paul lead guitar over it, and this thing would have been a whole nother beast. Mm-hmm. It would have been the best of anything.
I will say the production.
It would have been the best thing. It'd been better than any Kiss song in that era,
For real.
I will say the production leaves it lacking. Like it feels like if they had just done a little bit more with the guitar tones and the drum
recorded
tones.
fairly quickly on the cheap.
Oh, absolutely, but it still just feels a little thin. I think if they had just beefed it up a little bit more in post production, it probably would have had a little bit more guts to it. But either way, fun intro.
Yeah, I agree. Followed with Hard Luck Woman by Garth Brooks. Country superstar Garth Brooks, backed by Kiss themselves.
And that's the part that just weirds me out so much.
Easily the best track on the CD, though.
Really? You think so?
100%.
Garth Brooks was a big Kiss fan and modeled his show accordingly. He brought the big Kiss show to the country circuit, which now everyone in country's doing.
Exactly, but it started with him country.
But it started with him, and he stole it all from Kiss. I mean, right up to flying, all of it.
Yep.
Flamethrowers, the whole 9 yards.
Yep.
I don't understand how that works in the context of a country show. I don't
either.
To know.
I'm not a fan.
Well, how does Flames and Fireworks work during a Paul McCartney show? But he makes it work.
True.
Hey man,
fair point.
That thunder rolls.
Yeah, I guess. I'm
not
never,
a fan either.
Garth Brooks to me is sort of the patron saint of pop country, the way country has been so watered down so poorly. We would never have had a Luke Bryan if it weren't for Garth Brooks.
I 100% agree with that.
I will say it's so interesting, and I think they kind of showcase this a little bit better on this record than the previous one, how you can take a song and change one little aspect and it's all of a sudden a brand new song. Like, you wouldn't listen to the original version of Hard Luck Woman and go, oh, that'd be a cool country song. But as soon as you throw his twang on the vocal, it's a country song.
I don't think so. I disagree with that. I think that this could have, and I'm going to get to this point later in this album. I think that it isn't a country song, and I think that's what hurt it. This wasn't even released as a single. It should have been.
This should have been the lead single.
But
absolutely.
But I don't. It wouldn't have gotten played. I don't think, because it was still going to be too rock for country at that time and too country for rock.
Okay, yeah, I am looking at it through a 2020
and not at
lens.
all favorable to top 40 pop radio.
No, I am looking at a retrospective lens where country has now gotten so muddled. I hear something like
Nowadays,
this, and now this sounds twangy country as hell.
But interestingly, Garth Brooks wanted not to do a country version of anything. He wanted to do a full bore hard rock. I want to do some classic Kiss.
Wow.
I want to break free of my constraints here and do something different.
Have some fun.
And was kind of told, no, let's just put your hand into this glove right here.
Yeah.
And
if that ain't country, I'll kiss your ass.
Yeah. It doesn't work for me.
It's really interesting hearing Paul backing up another singer.
Yeah,
like that.
They would end up playing on the Tonight Show with him.
Mm-hmm, I've seen that.
Yeah. But the thing to me was the curiosity of what if he had tried to do. He came in and said, "No, man, I want to do
making love
or something."
I want you.
Wonder how that would have worked.
In the morning, I raise mine.
I don't think he would have twanged it. I don't think he has that much of a twang.
I want you.
I don't think he has that much of a twang on this.
I don't know. Be a hard luck woman.
Well, he's playing a little bit to it, but I think it's kind of a.
It's more or less the draw than the twang.
Right.
Yeah, I think he could have done it without that, and I think he, it just would have been curious to see what he would have chosen to do and how it would have turned out had he got to do it that way. This is followed by Anthrax doing "She," which we talked about, I think, in the last episode, just touched on briefly.
Yeah, man. John Bush era Anthrax, no less.
Yeah, and Gene and Paul actually produced this one. They kind of directed them and kind of pointed them in the direction.
Well, for a band that's supposed to be part of the so-called Big Four of thrash, this sounds really weak. I don't understand that guitar sound at all.
It sounds big, but they're thin.
It doesn't sound big. It sounds like the Wicked Lester version with distortion, with cheap distortion at that. It's terrible sounding, and people love this guitar sound. I had an argument with my brother about this. He's like, "Man, that sounds great," and I'm like, "Man, that sounds like fucking broke dick." It's fucking terrible.
I will agree. Like,
who listens to this shit and go, "Yeah, that's fucking great"?
We all know at least 10 people.
I'm definitely not a fan of that guitar tone. And honestly, out of the big four, I've listened to more Anthrax and Metallica than any of the rest. And this is just indicative of Anthrax's sound at the time, and I didn't care for it.
Who does this appeal to in 1994, though? And we're right in the fucking blood and guts of grunge.
Yeah.
And I can't also see that this was obviously we know these guys are big fucking Kiss fans.
Yeah.
But
it just doesn't come through.
It does. They do the coda of
the live version
of the live version, but it's got all the annoying speed scales and all that.
I think it's fine, but I will agree with you on the sound. It's weird hearing a metal band do it, but it kind of works in a metal sense just because of the way the riffs played. I don't know. It's fine. Again, I can take it or leave it too.
Yeah, I could leave it. I don't. I guess part of me is also judging it again as a quote unquote heavy metal band that has no heaviness to them. It's just so steely and reedy and just it doesn't really work for me. And it's also one of my favorite Kiss songs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't know. This one just didn't. Even though I was an Anthrax fan, and this was one of the reasons I wanted to listen to the record, I was like, "Ooh, Anthrax doing Kiss." It's in the same line as this same era did a cover of "We're a Happy Family," and it sounds about the same. That's not that great either. The Ramones song "We're a Happy Family" rather.
This is followed up by the band Gin Blossoms doing "Christine 16." Now this is fresh from their success as a with a multi-platinum debut album. I think they sold 4 million copies, which
Oh, wow.
makes them arguably the bigger band than Kiss at this point.
What was their hit?
They had a song called Hey Jealousy, and oh god, I can't remember the other one.
I'll look it up.
It's like Gin Blossoms, Spin Doctors.
Yeah, they were part of that. You know, that was
Hey,
the
Jealousy, Found Out About You.
Found Out About You.
Okay.
I hate that.
Follow You
goddamn
Down.
song.
That's the one.
All of these have
the most.
like tons of
That
plays.
band was so fucking benign and terrible, and so is this cover.
Till I Hear It From You.
This sounds like a demo to me. It's so poorly
I
recorded.
know. Quite a few of these do.
And Kiss would end up playing on the Conan O'Brien show with them doing this song. Mm-hmm. And you can tell one of the guys is really into it if you ever get to see the footage of it. Kiss looks so bizarre next to him, Gene and Paul do, because again, that crepe hair looking, their hair just looks fucking fake.
It's just frizzed out like crazy, and plus the extensions.
They look like fucking wax figures next to this band of kids. You know, it's really bizarre. It's a super surreal thing to watch. If you
I've
ever
only
get a
got
chance to
one
see
major
it.
takeaway from this version. So we've all kind of addressed how the middle part of Christine 16 is a little weird. Even for the era, it was a little weird.
Both the tribute albums keep this.
Not only do they keep it, he repeats it over
Yeah,
and over at the end. So it's not even like the guys, look, I'm going to do it like once or twice. Like, pick which one you like better or splice them together. Like, I kind of don't want to do this line. No, he repeats it. Oh, and he even says something like, well, maybe I do.
Yeah.
Something like that at the very end. And I'm like, God, you're making it worse. Stop. It was kind of creepy to start with, and you're making it a little worse.
I don't know. I never cared for this band. This was like the era when these bands would come. It's almost like garage rock bands from the 60s. They come from nowhere, they have a massive hit, and they go back to nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they don't, you know, it's like, who are these bands? Why did they even exist? They existed so they could, the labels
the
could turn
beast.
out, they could turn out product. And that's
Yeah.
all this is product.
Yep.
All these bands that came up post grunge, all these alternative bands were just product. And the thing of it is so is the hair metal bands. They were just product as well. And depending on your fan base, you get one kind of opinion or the other. If you look at it from a whole, you realize none of these bands ever mattered. They were never going to matter. They were all just simply product.
Yeah.
And Kiss
Take
aren't,
that, Gin Blossoms.
and Kiss were not product. And I think Kiss would gladly have served to have been product at some point.
I think they were a little bit of a product in the 70s.
But they were a quality product. Well, I mean,
They
but
cared-
I'm showing that this had shelf life.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't something to sell this week.
This
and be
wasn't
done
a
with.
non-perishable.
This is a non-perishable product. This is something that, and that's my point. That's my point about Kiss as a whole.
They're the Twinkie of the rock
I was
and roll
gonna say-
universe.
It might
kinda
be-
how they sell themselves every now and
They
then.
may be of no greater quality than a Twinkie, but who doesn't fucking love a Twinkie?
That's what I'm getting at.
Exactly.
I thought that was actually a pretty good analogy.
Okay, and going back to our debate about the countryisms of Garth Brooks, this is the very curious anomaly on this album, Rock and Roll All Night by a band called Toad the Wet Sprocket.
This is such a bullshit track.
Well, it's really odd because, you know, they take this rock and roll anthem and turn it into a country rock song. And, you know, I don't know if this is meant to be clever or ironic or both.
I just thought it was dumb. I was just like,
It's
listening to
delivered
it.
so straight.
And the arrangement's different, like chord changes and things like that too. I'm sitting there going like, why? You know?
Well, it's interesting in its own failure because to me, I'm listening to it with hindsight now, knowing that there's a rise of alt country that comes up very close behind this that does this,
Right.
but does it much better.
Right.
And I can't tell if they're being serious or if they're not. But, you know, I think if it weren't Rock and Roll All Night, you know, for that genre, it would have worked as a song with its own legs. So I
Right.
think they're being serious, but it's almost like, well, we have this song and it kind of works in the same kind of, you know, it's really bizarre to me though.
I'll give a different take on it because one, This is one of my favorites on the record, honestly. It really caught me off guard in kind of a good way. Mainly because the vocal's pretty strong. Like it's maybe a little twangy and maybe a little of the time, but like the vocal's strong in that he's hitting the right notes. He's hitting the right keys. He's got the right melody, and he goes back to it.
That's what I'm saying. So he's not sending it up in any way.
No, and honestly, it felt like a campfire song. Take away the pop country of it. This sounds like some Kiss fans had an acoustic guitar and was just like, fuck it, check this out.
I wouldn't even call it pop country. I would just say it's like more of an alt country kind of a thing.
You know,
I mean,
the thing we were talking about earlier.
It has pedal steel on it too, doesn't it?
Man, if they would have...
No, it's got like some strings, or it's got a little extra something behind it, but it's not like a pedal steel.
I found that it grew on me as I listened to it, and I was like, because I went from like, what the fuck is this, to going, well, that's kind of curious.
And see, and that's why I say it sounded like
I liked it.
To me, it just sounded like some guys around the campfire that just started kind of riffing. Is like, you know what? I could put Rock and Roll All Night lyrics over this, and then by the end of the night, you've got like everyone around there going, I want to run. I don't know. There was a certain amount of fun to it that I really enjoyed.
It's arguably the most original take of any of the versions.
You want to say that with the next one coming up?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna read my notes on this, and then I'm gonna let y'all say whatever you want. I wrote Calling Dr. Love. The group is called Shandy's Addiction. A quote unquote super group featuring members of Rage Against the Machine and Tool.
Okay.
This band had no reason to exist other than to record this horrid track, which also had no reason to exist. This is just stupid. Discuss.
Yeah, I thought that was somebody familiar, like the singer. That sounds like the guy from Tool.
That's who it is.
Okay, so yeah, it's awful. I hate it.
It's fucking terrible.
I'll just co-sign everything that's said. I hate it.
Why? I mean, and this
that's
this
one
is
that's like that. That's the ironic shithead '90s take on this.
And you know that the guitar player from Rage Against the Machine is a next level Kiss fan.
Yeah.
And he seems like a really fucking cool guy. Again, somebody I could sit down and talk music with or whatever else. But I fucking hate Rage. I hate that guitar tone he has. I hate the way he holds his fucking guitar. Right?
Up to his chin.
It's like when you're talking about someone, you're like, and I even hate the way they eat their food.
Right. You know? And you know, whatever. Me and Billy the Kid, we never got along. It's not good. Why? This just goes to show that they're overreaching. Mm-hmm. You know, they're scrambling just to. It's like, was this assembled?
We can't get Tool. We can't get Rage Against the Machine. Yeah. But what if we get the guy from Tool and the guy
a couple from Tool and a couple from Rage said
It might be that like half the guys in Tool were like fuck that, and half of the guys in Rage Against the Machine were like fuck that, and the other guys were like, well, we want to do it.
Yeah.
And then they come up with this bullshit name that kind of like plays off Jane's Addiction with the song, the Kiss song Shandy. It's just everything about this is just bad. It's like once you've gotten that far, you got to realize, oh, this is not a good idea.
No,
but
this one is tied with another song from my least favorite. We've not gotten to that one yet.
Well, the next track on here is Dinosaur Jr., the indie rock darlings both then and now, doing Going Blind.
See, this would have worked as the alt country song. Picture like a slow acoustic version of this.
That's true. I had not thought of that, but yeah, that may. I'm not fond of this.
I'm not either.
I don't like the strings underneath the guitar.
Really?
And I don't like Jay Massis' solo on this.
See, I like Dinosaur Jr. though, but him singing this is kind of weird, you know, because it's that dry kind of, you know, I'm 93 or 16, even though it's in key.
I wrote that this song still works though, even in spite of its poor arrangement, simply because it's a great fucking song.
Yeah.
It's still kind of hard to destroy because it's always been a really great song.
This one was a standout for me. I remember listening to it the first few times around and hating this version because of his vocal. I was just like, oh my God, this is wretched. And then when this version came up again, I was like, oh God, I forgot about this. But the more I started listening to it, the more I kind of started like going back to it, like as I was kind of like skimming the record again. Like I'd sometimes like hit the repeat on this one. Like something about this one really grew on me to the point where I kind of like the vocal delivery. Like there's something about the lyrics with that delivery that work, because the song isn't very cheery. It's not morose, but it's not a cheery song.
Right.
So even with Cap singing the "I'm 93, you're 16," he kind of
Yeah, it's kind of
and even though it sounds lazy,
it kind of also gives a dreamlike kind of quality to
exactly, it gives it a certain vibe. And you know what? This is a perfect example of, I hear the beginnings of Symphony Alive. I hear the beginnings of them going, you can put strings behind our music. This one and another song, I think, is the beginning seeds of the thought. Because I know other bands are doing it at the time, but
not at this, not like.
Has the Metallica thing not happened?
No.
Okay, I didn't. I don't research bands like as much as I do this one.
Predates all of that. It's not unusual to have strings in it. It's a little bit unusual for this band to have strings in it, I think.
Yeah, they're mostly
Tell me something. Maybe you know. Jay Mascis or Jay Mascis?
I've heard Mascis.
I should know that. He played with Gigi Allen.
Really?
Yeah.
He did a show with Gigi Allen. And, they are notoriously a very loud, powerful group. And I think that doesn't really translate on anything I've ever heard recorded.
No, it doesn't translate to this, really.
No.
But no, this was a fun little divergence for me. I seem to enjoy the songs on this record that kind of steer away from it. Like Deuce was enjoyable. The Rock and Roll All Night, this one. So the ones that kind of stray away from the formula a little bit more, I seem to kind of like.
Right.
What I like about Jay Mascis is that he talks the way he sings. If you watch interviews with him, he's just like, we've got these Marshalls. They're cool.
Next track is Strutter by the group Extreme, who in this moment were in the waning throes of their own popularity.
Yeah.
And they were extremely popular. No pun intended. And this works for what they do, but what they do doesn't work for me.
No, me neither.
Positive, good vocals. He's a strong vocalist, but
everybody in that band was strong.
Yeah. But the music just falls flat.
Well, the thing that bothered me about Extreme, and this bothers me about this track, is it's like they try to use these different ideas. They try to be like funky and groovy. This was that and all time that. Period. It was that time, and I just always thought that was so fucking pretentious and phony, and it just doesn't work for me. And that's the reason why those bands like Extreme don't exist today.
But it's like, it was annoying to me because like the chorus is super strong with the background vocals and everything. Like everyone has a really good strong voice, and I'm just like, put some good music behind this, and this could actually be a really serviceable cover.
But Alex, that's Nuno Bettencourt, guitar god.
Give a shit, Cap.
That's Gary Sharon of Van Halen at one point.
Woo! Whoop-de, let me whip it out and twirl it for you. Whoop-de-doo.
I don't know. But I get why they would want this group on their thing.
Yeah, I get it, but it didn't.
This was 2 years after their peak.
Again, on their C list.
Yeah. That's followed now by a very curious anomaly on this. The Lemonheads doing Plaster Caster. And this sounds out of place on this collection to me. It would have fit better on the Hard to Believe collection.
I agree with that.
Now, Lemonheads was a name I had always heard, but I don't think I've actually sat down and listened to any of their music.
Me neither.
I've heard a little bit. I never got into them.
Okay.
I didn't care for them. But I think this is a fairly decent take because it doesn't change much from the original. They do kind of a direct. It's not bad, but it's not great.
It's kind of unremarkable.
It's unremarkable, and that's to me that's like worse than being bad.
Because at least with the bad that we talked about, there was like
you have an opinion.
Exactly. Yeah. This one is just so middle of the road. It's like it's not great, but like they didn't do anything different to make it discuss worthy.
Yeah, I don't feel like listening to it again.
It's like room temperature table wine with your dinner. It's like that was good, but
is that right?
Yeah. It's not like you're going to be going, what was that?
Man,
how would I get a bottle to take home?
Now, something we discussed earlier in the episode about Gene just calling folks. Mm-hmm. With this next song, I wonder if that's what that was.
Oh yeah,
because the beginning of this, which is the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones covering Detroit Rock City, starts with a voicemail from Gene Simmons. and he's basically saying of Kiss, basically saying
Simmons of Kiss
that Megadeth was supposed to do Detroit Rock City, and that you guys are allowed to do basically anything else other than Detroit Rock City. And then you hear dude, loo. So it's kind of supposed to be like a joke on, like, we're gonna do Detroit Rock City then.
Fuck you, Gene.
Right.
But I wonder, like, if that was like a genuine voicemail from Gene. Like before, Megadeth dropped out.
I don't know. That kind of irony is the kind of stuff that I don't get off on. I've never enjoyed this band. I think they're an insipid frat band that enjoyed 15 minutes of fame, which was 14 minutes and 59 seconds longer than it was needed or deserved.
Woo!
Fuck this. I hate these fucking. It's, people love this like ska thing, and I always thought it sounded like fucking bad frat boy music. It's like, hey guys, let's have a band. Well, I can't play guitar, but I got a horn.
I played trombone in high school.
I'm in my defense. There are some ska bands or whatever that I think are okay, but they're the ones that have been informed by something
European ska and shit.
Right. That come from like dance hall reggae or something.
Right.
Now, this does not. These are all hardcore guys playing with the horn section from the local fucking high school group or something. I don't fucking know.
Now,
it sucks.
This is remember when I said that song and another's tied for my least favorite? This is the one. This is one of my least favorites on the record. And actually, it has to be my least favorite. And it's because it pisses me off. Because the music I don't hate. I don't hate the musical rendition of this.
Except for the horn parts that are on the weird spots.
I'm getting to that. But it's the goddamn vocals that.
Well, I mean, and that's that guy comes from Boston hardcore, and I get it. Yeah. Boston hardcore.
It's his vocal delivery that drives me up the wall. But what Cap was talking about with those random horn sections, example number 2 of the beginnings of Gene and Paul hearing that their songs can have horn sections. And the reason I bring it up is they're doing a very similar break on the symphony during the they're doing a very similar horn section on symphony. It's not 1-to-1. There's a couple different notes, but the attitude and the delivery is kind of there. And that's why I say I think subconsciously when they were writing out the music for Symphony, they were like, well, we can kind of do
They weren't writing out the music for
No,
the
it was the
symphony,
composer, but you know what I mean.
We've talked about in the past how a lot of their stuff, even going like all the way back to their earliest stuff, had that kind of R&B soul influence, and I've said I could hear horn sections like a Memphis style horn section on some of that
like
stuff.
A Berry Gordy arrangement or something.
Not a Berry Gordy arrangement, Memphis Stax.
Oh, you come full on Stax.
I'm talking, and so that doesn't surprise me so much. I just don't think this is done good. No. I think it isn't done with that kind of a thought, and I think that it hurts it. Like I said, I've said what I said.
And I just find it weird that Gene seemed to really sign off on this version because they made like a music video, and I think even Gene guest starred in it.
This is the only single off the album.
Yeah. So like Gene really like put his stamp on this.
And they pressed it as a vinyl single on green vinyl. So for collector nerds that just have to have it.
And you can't forget the random outburst of notes and franticness at the very end of the song.
I didn't care for it.
No.
The album closes with Black Diamond as composed, I suppose.
Yes.
By Yoshiki, who was a member of the band X Japan. Not X Los Angeles.
Yes.
Not the good X.
The other X.
The X. I don't understand. I'm sorry. I don't understand why these bands exist. This is like the X Japan is very much like the Dream Theater and the Trans-Siberian Orchestra and this kind of neo. I fucking hate this shit. It's like this just fucking just completely. It doesn't just eviscerate it. It doesn't just emasculate it. It doesn't just castrate it. It fucking removes everything.
Come on, man.
I don't like this. Organs
I don't like this either, but
I love the colorfulness to it.
This is forgettable movie music to me.
You hit the nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head. don't listen to this as an orchestral version of Black Diamond, because you're not going to get that.
Right.
That's what I was hoping for the first time I listened to it. I was like, oh my God, they're going to give us some really big wah, what da da, what da da, what dun 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 dun, as you're kind of expecting from a song like that. This
crescendos.
This is a Lord of the Rings. You're hiking up the mountain, about to reach the destiny after beating the final boss.
Whatever, man. That soundtrack's banging. No, I'm just kidding.
But that, if you're looking at this for, Russ, wake up. If you're looking at this for excitement, it's not going to be there. But I find it interesting that you could kind of slip this in an action movie and not immediately catch that as Black Diamond. And that's what I kind of took away from it and I enjoyed.
But to me, it's forgettable movie music. It's not memorable. It doesn't have those big crescendos. It's not like John Williams doing an epic score like he did behind, say, you know the music when you say Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mm-hmm. You know the music when you say Star Wars. You know the music when you say Jaws. These are memorable soundtracks. You know the music from Superman, the original Superman. This, I couldn't, it's so...
It's very
too
flowery,
self-reverential.
Yeah.
It's like, dig me and what I can do, and I don't like that. And I find this a stupid ending to a stupid album.
Only in the U.S. was it the ending, though.
Well, I don't know about the rest of it. So
there's only one other song, Unhighly.
Yeah, Unhighly. It's the German band, right?
Yes, a German band called, I'm not even going to try, but it's Die and then ARZTE.
With umlauts.
Yes. Either way, it's kind of an interesting version because they're singing Unholy in a completely different language. So you're getting like a really different vibe to the song. And honestly, what'd you say it was, German?
Yeah.
Yeah. It kind of has an extra little bite to it because German is not the nicest sounding language to start with.
And it's they kind of thrash metal it up a little bit too.
Yeah, they give it it's got the production you don't like, Russ. But
Germans always sound like they're mad at you when they talk, even if they're telling you sweet shit.
Yeah. So imagine. Yeah. So the chorus on this.
I love you, baby, so much. Please let me just
off.
Yeah. So for Unholy, they're going on highly like that. It's kind of spooky.
Run and hide.
Yeah. So
I forgot that was on there. I didn't even look that up.
Yeah, it's an interesting version. It's definitely not good, but it is what it is. It's a German band playing Unholy, and they kind of thrash it up a little bit and sing it in their own language.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool, kind of cooler than a lot of the tracks on this album. So
honestly, yeah, like, okay, what you were saying, Russ, this one would almost kind of fit on the other record a little better.
Yeah.
Like it has a certain rawness that the other tracks don't have. Everything else felt kind of slick and produced in LA. This one kind of had a little bit more of that underground.
Yeah, they recorded that in Germany.
This translates, their name translates to the physicians.
Ooh, okay.
The Unholy Physicians.
As far as I'm going to go into researching them.
Yeah.
But along with the CD and cassette tape, they also released a home movie for this.
Movie?
Yes, they released a VHS for Kiss My
Not
Ass.
a movie. A home video.
Yeah, a home video.
Okay,
sorry.
You confused me.
That's a video, not a moving picture.
I think a movie. Yeah, there was the home video. Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty light, but it does have cleaner versions of things that we had not gotten up to this point. Like the unedited Mego Doll collection, the unedited makeup commercial. So it's like we got like little snippets of it with like other background music. This is the first time we saw them in full black screen to black screen.
This came out, and I guess this came out in conjunction with, or right thereafter, and it does feature them in the studio with Anthrax. I remember that. But the selling point of this home video was the same as it was the selling point of every home video they had done primarily to this point, which was that treasure trove of classic Kiss makeup era footage, which is all anyone wanted to see. No one gave a shit about non-makeup Kiss. And I got non-makeup Kiss fans who are like, that's not true. That might not be true for you. I'm sure there's a obviously there is a a contingent of the fan base that likes that stuff.
Right.
But again, no reason for this band to exist whatsoever outside of that foundation. And they're finally embracing that. And you're seeing this, obviously, again, everything here is primarily from both of these tribute albums are primarily from the Makeup era that's being covered.
I think Lick It Up was the only song from the previous record. And then on
War
this
Machine.
one, well, that's still
War Machine's
Makeup.
still technically
That's
Makeup.
true. That's true.
That is Makeup. But then the only song on this one was the bonus track, Unhighly.
Yeah. So, and then you see this again. We're finally getting to see all of this non-makeup stuff. They're showing off classic renderings of album artwork that in progress. You know.
Because they also use this as a way to do cross promotion because they're also talking about making history. They kind of
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The book comes out at the same time.
That's why they're kind of showing off some of the old photos and stuff because they're like, we're putting together a Bible.
And that's what you wanted to see, and that was what was so exciting about that book because it was going to have so much of that behind the scenes stuff, and that's all anyone is really. They've really primed the tank for this,
And for the extra minutia aspect.
And you know who they hired to start putting all this together?
That's what I was about to get into. Yeah, go ahead.
Young Tommy Thayer.
Yeah, Tommy Thayer's
So-
behind a lot of this. He's working behind the scenes, making this happen.
This is. I think he's mentioned a few times that History was like the first big project they kind of put him on and was like, hey, prove yourself, help us put together this book.
They approached. I forget who was it. They approached a publisher about doing this book at one point, and it went through several permutations. And then at another point, I think they were talking to the publishers of what was Rock and Roll Comics, which would have been kind of weird, before ultimately deciding to do this book themselves, which is probably the smart thing to do.
Even though it had binding issues on the first run.
From what I understand, the first run had really bad binding issues. I've got a copy. I don't pull it out much because I'm always scared that I'm going to deal with the binding issues.
You're like, do I have the first or second run? I don't know.
It's really excellent. It's really well done. I think there are superior Kiss books that have come up in its wake. Maybe we should do an episode on Kiss books. I
think that would be a fun one. Yeah.
There's a lot though that I haven't seen or read, but because maybe it'll give me an excuse to spend the money on it.
It's actually one of my favorites is still over there, and even though it's kind of controversial because some of the photos are a little fixed up, I still like the Kiss Early Years book.
Oh yeah, that's a great book. Yeah.
It's like, but people kind of at it because like all of Gene's photos, like the eyes are dotted or something.
I think the absolute, pinnacle for all Kiss books, the measuring stick, as far as like photo books and stuff like that, is Lydia Chris's book.
I still got to get my hands on that.
Fucking awesome. It's not good. I don't see anyone touching that.
But the Kiss Army is alive and well.
But the Kiss Army is alive and well. They have come of age, and they're finding that this audience exists, and it's not necessarily a niche audience.
And they're about to kind of witness that firsthand with our next episode.
From Nirvana to Garth Brooks.
Well, I'm talking about even on a fan level being so appreciative of the classic era.
But that celebrity endorsement don't hurt either.
I had another thought, and I've just lost it. So maybe I'll pick up that thought, and we'll share it on the next episode of No Time to Turn. So
we
there
bust
you go.
out some acoustic guitars.
Yeah, we'll bust out the acoustics, man. Talk about sitting around the campfire.
Yeah.
And we will look at the Unplugged album and the convention tour and the hard foundation for what will ultimately become the reunion. So hopefully you guys will take the ride with us, and we will see you all next time on No Time to Turn.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.